of everything Jen said, of everything law enforcement ranger John said. Fortunately, we get a chance to work at a place where every single person wants to come over the summer because of our beautiful beaches, our multi-use path, the sunsets, the sunrises. The unfortunate thing is us as employees, you guys as volunteers, it's often our task to tell somebody when they can't do something, which always isn't the best conversation to have. And Sandy Hook is a bevy of recreational opportunities. People come out here, they ride their bikes, they kayak, they swim, they walk their dogs, they run, they do photography. Problem is, a lot of these recreational hobbies don't jive well together. Surfers don't get along with people who are fishing where they want to be surfing. Birders don't often get along with fishermen. People driving cars don't get along with the cyclists. People cycling on the multi-use path don't get along with rollerbladers. So a lot of our recreational hobbies here don't tend to jive together because everybody's trying to use the same resource but use it for different ways. So we have kind of the catalyst for some awkward conversations, some conversations that of course can get escalated very quickly. So in 2019, the Park Service, the government in particular, really started pushing these conflict de-escalation trainings. At that time, there was a lot of divisiveness in the country. Probably should have been offered a lot earlier, but we've had some things in recent history that have given people who, again, we are not law enforcement rangers, you guys as volunteers are not law enforcement rangers, but us, as Patty alluded to before, their badges are a lot bigger than ours, but people seeing this badge automatically assume that we have authority, which we do have authority, but we don't have the authority to give somebody a ticket to arrest somebody, although we are often mistaken as so because we wear this badge. So I feel like, you know, dating back to when George Floyd was murdered, you know, there was a lot of controversy when Trump was in office. You know, you had divisive opinions on COVID. So, I mean, there were a lot of situations where we were being brought into conversations we don't necessarily want to have, which we still do not want to have those conversations. So we are going to go over the slow bevy of techniques. Now, what's important to remember is this isn't a step-by-step process. There are 4 individual techniques that can be used together, or you could use simply just one of them. So we're going to go through SLOW. It's an acronym like everything else in the government. So SLOW, the S stands for stay calm, the L stands for listening, O is offering validation, and W is walk away. And I think all of you guys have the printout in your training folder as well, if you guys just want to look at that to kind of follow along. So here we go, everything broken down by letter. Stay cool. So also keep in mind in the back of your head that like all of these things are much easier said than done. Staying cool obviously sounds super easy to do, but now, like Patty said, you're on your 50th time in a row answering the exact same question. It's 100 degrees out, you're dehydrated, your shift's over in 10 minutes. It's a lot harder to stay cool in those situations than it would be when you first got on the clock, say at 8:15 in the morning, you had 10 hours of sleep last night, a great dinner. So a lot of this stuff is kind of knowing what to look for, but also yourself. You know, nobody is going to know that threshold in you better than you. And that threshold could be different for everybody. So where there might be a subject matter where I can stay cool, that might be John's trigger spot where just bringing it up with him could kind of take him over the threshold. So, you know, it's important to know what staying cool looks like and what getting agitated or angry looks like. So what behaviors in others make you lose your cool? I'm sure we've all lost our cool once or twice. What's something that kind of bothers us? What gets us going? Anybody? Littering. Littering is definitely something that I think grinds at each and every one of us out here. Littering is definitely tough. I think that, any other examples of things that make you lose your cool, things that get you upset? People lie to you, right? We don't like when people lie to us. We don't, you know, I don't know about you guys, but there's a proper way to have a conversation. I don't really like when you're like, your nose is touching my nose and I can feel your like spit hitting my face. That kind of makes me lose my cool as well. I don't like when somebody intends to make me feel foolish or stupid. I don't really like that either. So I mean, you guys have all lost your cool before, as have I. You know, you guys are the ones who know kind of where that threshold is inside of you. You know, what about physical reactions? When you're upset or somebody else is upset, what do you tend to notice? Any kind of telltale signs that somebody's ticked off? People get heated, right? I mean, sometimes they're physically sweating. Sometimes people are turning red. Their voices get louder. People are talking faster. People are talking with their hands. So knowing a lot of these kind of physical signs that somebody is angry, it's kind of that first telltale sign that a situation is escalating, when what we want to do is kind of de-escalate the situation. So again, just knowing not only what to look for in somebody else, but knowing yourself as well, right? I know that when I start getting upset, you know, my heart starts pounding a little bit. I can kind of hear it in my voice. I start getting hot. So if you start feeling that, you know that not only is this visitor starting to escalate things, but you're starting to get escalated yourself. So kind of knowing yourself and where to draw the line. So what are some things that you do to stay cool? I feel like this, you know, I gave this example the other day. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the movie Happy Gilmore, but in Happy Gilmore, he goes to kind of his happy place before he goes to hit a putt, right? And sees his grandmother there. There's all these happy things going on. He sees his golf coach there, and he kind of mentally goes there. This is where you take those deep breaths, right? They say it's scientifically proven that if you take 10 deep breaths, it's automatically going to slow your heart rate down. So, you know, kind of mentally stepping away from the situation, reminding yourself of all the good things in life, taking those deep breaths, you know, really just trying to calm yourself down. Because I do think attitudes are contagious, where, you know, if John is very upset and he's talking to me and he's angry, it's far more likely that I am. Or if John comes up to me with a big smile on his face, he's happy, he's loving life, he's loving the day, you know, that's also going to be very contagious as well. So I think the cooler you are, the more stable you are, that can kind of be addictive to the other person you're in this conversation with. So just trying to display the energy you want that person to display back to you. Listening. So, you know, as it says here, think about someone who you know is a good listener. You know, I like to use my mother as a great listening example and a terrible listening example at the same time. My mom is always there for me to kind of voice my opinion, to hear me out. She always picks up the phone when I call. It's important to have somebody in your life that you can kind of call and just get things off your chest. Where my mom isn't the greatest listener is before I'm even done venting, she will often give me advice on how to make things better, which I don't always want to hear. You know, there's a lot of times where you don't want advice, you don't want to hear anything, you just want to say something to get it off your chest. Now, understanding that that's what you're going to deal with out here. If a visitor sought you out because you're wearing a uniform and they're upset about something, the number one thing we can do is at least listen to them. Now, is everything they're saying going to be correct or true? Probably not. But understanding that if they came to you to voice some sort of displeasure, they may not be justified in why they're feeling that way, but they are justified that they are feeling that way. They are upset, you know? So if they were upset and sought you out to have this conversation, there's something bothering them. And the number one thing we can do a lot of the times is just listen to them. And a big part of this is not only listening, but actively listening. So I'm sure we've all been in conversations with somebody else. I feel like I do it a lot with like customer service over the phone, where I'm trying to plead my case and they're just kind of like yesing me to death. They're like, yeah, yeah, okay, yeah. See, when somebody's listening to you like that, are they really listening, or are they just trying to wait for you to stop talking, you know? So I feel like actively listening is being coherent, is having good eye contact with that person you're talking to, responding to what they're saying. If they're asking you for information, provide it to them, or find somebody or some, you know, information that you can hand them. So I feel like a lot of times, listening is not just physically listening, but letting that person know you're listening. having an engaging conversation with them, not trying to talk over them. And you know, I know for me personally, if something's really bothering me, you know, not that just getting it off my chest solves that problem, but a lot of times when I'm really fired up, I'm really heated, and I'm kind of holding everything inside, simply just talking about it and getting it off my chest definitely makes me feel a lot better. You have to understand that that's what a lot of these visitors will be going through as well. If they're fired up about something, if something's ticking them off, if they saw somebody litter or somebody sit next to them on the beach blowing cigarette smoke in their face, obviously they are heated, they have every right to be heated. But a lot of times them just finding somebody to stress this to will help kind of calm their nerves in itself. And then obviously we can kind of take it to the next step, have that conversation with that person smoking ourselves, call law enforcement, kind of take it from there. You know, we kind of talked about this as well a little bit, but how do you show somebody you're listening? That's where, you know, we're kind of matching their energy. We are keeping eye contact. We're responding to their conversations. If they need information, we're giving it to them. So there's definitely ways you can show somebody you're actively listening to them. So offer validation. I think this is the strongest technique in this suite of techniques. And it is very important to state that we are not agreeing with somebody, but we are attempting to see where they are coming from, kind of stepping into their shoes for a minute. I feel like the example I always kind of look at here, and Zach brought it up before, right? Like, we hate when we see people litter. We don't understand why they would litter. Like, it's hard for us to understand that they don't realize the effect that that's having on the environment. But, you know, when you think about it from the visitor's perspective, it's obviously never okay to litter, but trying to understand that if they grew up going to the beach virtually anywhere else in New Jersey, whether it be Seabright, Long Branch, Manasquan, you go to those beaches, there's trash cans on the beach, there's dumpsters in the parking lot. These people for 30, 40, 50, 60 years knew going to the beach, I bring my lunch to the beach, I'm done with my lunch, there's a trash can right there to throw it out. So again, we're not agreeing with them. It's never going to be okay to take your trash and throw it on the beach, but understanding that these people their whole lives have found trash receptacles when they went to the beach, and now they're here for the first time in their lives and there's no trash can around whatsoever. Again, not agreeing that it's okay to litter, but kind of seeing where they're coming from with how this can kind of be, you know, out of the norm for them, something they weren't expecting, something they're not used to. You know, I feel like you could pretty much say the same thing about fishing. You know, on that map that Patty shared, there was really only 3 major locations where they are protecting the piping plover, right? So if somebody were to fish at some of these other beaches, they've never seen a string line before, or, you know, maybe even signs to educate people on the piping plover. So, you know, trying to, again, not agree with them, but understand, hey, I was just down in Seabright or Long Branch fishing, and I was allowed to fish the entire beach. Why are you giving me such a hard time here about doing this? So again, we're not agreeing with them because they're wrong. You know, we are just trying to understand where they're coming from. And I think that when people have a complaint or feel a certain way, and they see that you're trying to at least understand where they're coming from, it's a way to have a lot more of a positive interaction overall. And then everybody's favorite step in the suite here is walk away. I feel like when I first started working for the Park Service, this wasn't something that was blatantly told to me, but it's important for us all to know that it is completely okay to walk away from somebody. As we mentioned before, our health and safety is our #1 priority. I don't mean to downplay anybody, but this isn't, open heart surgery, right? Like, we are not risking our life out here. It is okay when you are involved in a stressful situation to walk away. And I feel like, again, this is something that may not have been told to a lot of us, but it should be, that you should not have to feel intimidated, you should not have to feel fearful, you should not have to feel like your own personal health is at risk. If you are having a conversation with somebody and you don't feel right about it, and you feel kind of off edge, or you have that inkling that this could turn to go in a negative direction, you are perfectly fine to walk away. And you know, I feel like there's different exit language we can use where we're not just like, you know, all right, peace out, we're out of here, like I'm done. But, you know, I think that there's ways where you can have conversations with people that say, you know, for instance, it depends on the situation, but, you know, I've basically given you all the information I have. If you need more information or you'd like to voice a formal complaint, here you can call the park dispatch number. I don't know how you would like to work kind of like the chain of command, but for you guys volunteering out there, I don't know if that's giving John's email address or his cell phone number, and then he can kind of pass it up the line to Jen. But a lot of times people are happier when they talk to who they see as a manager or a supervisor. I can voice my opinion to you all I want, but I'm not going to be happy until this gets escalated up to the next line. So I feel like it's important for you guys to know how to handle this, where if I've taken this as far as I can, maybe you need to talk to somebody else. Here's John's email address. I would always recommend giving out email addresses and not phone numbers. By giving somebody the option of somebody to contact, I feel like there's another kind of technique you can use to kind of show people that their complaint is valid and it's being escalated up the line. You know, there's comment cards, the dispatch phone number. You know, I'm not trying to tell anybody to like just blatantly lie, but there may be other things you have to do that day, right? So you can get, you know, we've had this conversation and, you know, it kind of feels like we're going in circles. I think we've pushed it as far as we can. If you would like to reach out to my supervisor, John or Jen, you can reach out to them, but I have to go lead a program at Beach B that I'm running late for. You know, sometimes that can help you kind of exit a situation as well. But you know, a lot of these situations, like I said, you might come up to somebody who is, let's face it, they could be under the influence of alcohol mixed with sitting on the beach for 8 hours in the 90-degree heat, and they are belligerent, they are unhappy, their ride has left them, they're stuck here at the beach. So you may walk up on somebody where it's like an immediate walk away. You know, this is scary, I do not know this individual, they are acting erratic, I don't like this, I need to remove myself from this situation immediately. Where if it's somebody who's upset that they can't find a trash can, you know, obviously throughout the midst of this, you're trying to stay cool, you're listening to them, you're trying to validate their opinions. But like I said, it's up to you guys to know your own threshold, to know when you've pushed the conversation as far as you possibly can, and then it's time to kind of get out of there. You know, John said it best. We do not get paid nearly enough to be intimidated, to fear for our lives, to fear any sort of physical assault. That's not what we're here for. If we're ever involved in those situations, you know, you have to understand your own threshold and you have to feel that yourself to say, I need to remove myself from this situation. I don't mean to, you know, hammer all this stuff home. Like, you guys are going to be out there on a daily basis dealing with very disgruntled, unhappy people. I think the interactions we had, 9.9 out of 10, are people who want to be here, people who are happy with what we do to preserve and protect this beautiful land. But, you know, I think the purpose of this is that 0.1 out of 10 of conversations that has the ability to go the right way or the wrong way, and we need to do everything we can to keep people calm and de-escalate situations. You know, it only takes you saying the wrong thing once or in the wrong tone where things start to be escalated. And, you know, once you start escalating a situation, it's really hard to kind of walk that back down the ladder. Anybody volunteering last year have any like examples of a conflict, something that may have gotten escalated, anything at all? Okay, I was wondering if we could use those like, yeah.
Yeah, so I was working at a information table at Lot City, and someone took really great offense to the climate change pamphlet.
Oh,
and
really?
And they wanted to have like a you know, discussion about it.
Of course.
Yeah, so I mean, I de-escalated, you know, I said, well, you know, that's just pamphlets, I'm a volunteer here talking about piping plovers, I'm not here to talk about climate change necessarily, and so I did it, essentially what you suggested.
Yeah, that's in, you know, I feel like, you know, not to harp on that experience in particular, but I feel like everything now in the world we live in, you're either on one side or the other, you know? There really isn't a lot of gray area where, you know, we're able to kind of see both sides. And I feel like it's a situation like that where that person probably brought up that conversation because they wanted to bring that up, you know? So I feel like just wearing the uniform, you were kind of out there as a beacon, like, hey, I'm here, voice your opinion to me. So I feel like, you know, a lot of times people are going to have that conversation with the first person they saw. It just happened to be you that day, you know? So that situation could go two ways, right? I mean, you could battle back with hard facts and, you know, X% of scientists said this, and is that going to get you anywhere in that conversation? Absolutely not, you know? A lot of times people have that opinion, they want their opinion to be heard, and a lot of times once they kind of get that off their chest, you can kind of sense the mood change almost immediately. You know, they came here with an agenda to talk about this to the first person who they saw in a uniform. You know, once they get it off their chest, you know, I feel like you can kind of just see the situation change drastically. You know, I feel like we're all kind of in here. There's a bunch of different park rangers, volunteers, everybody's kind of in a different role, and I feel like everybody, while we're going through this, can kind of think back on a situation, you know, in their role. So it's kind of hard with so many people in different roles to kind of bring up one topic that kind of hits it for all of us. But, you know, I think Zach brought it up before. I think we all feel such a strong way about litter. It's one of those things that gets our gears going because I think it's so easy for us to understand the harm that all of this trash does, and we see kind of the trash every day in the parking lots, on the beaches. So I think it's hard for us to understand what people don't understand about littering. So again, I feel like it's one of those situations where to have that conversation is almost a test to ourselves, because how do we have that conversation without getting, you know, extremely fired up? So again, you know, just staying cool, trying to see where people are come from, listening to them. But then most importantly, you know, knowing your own threshold and knowing kind of where you draw the line personally to, okay, we are infringing on that line before we cross over it. Like, we need to de-escalate this situation by walking away.
So last year, at the end of my time, I was going down to that narrow road for Fishing Beach.
Okay.
And just to, you know, it's the end of the day for me. So I saw a woman get out of her car with a dog, and there's a sign right on that dune, no dogs, a little cute little dog. So I didn't have my hat on because I was driving, got out of the car, had a sweatshirt on, and she started screaming at me like crazy. And she said to me, "So, what are you, some bee that's in charge of the beach?" And I was like, "Oh, I have my sweatshirt covering up, and I didn't have a hat on." So then she kind of like evaporated, but she was really nasty.
Yeah, I mean, again, I unfortunately, you know, like I said before, we work at a place where everybody wants to come to, and when we don't let them do what they came here to do,
Right.
they're not going to be happy about it.
And she's standing, the dog is standing, right where the sign says no dogs.
Yeah.
And she's saying, "But this is a good dog."
Yeah, that's a good dog.
My dog doesn't like the big sign.
Oh, wow, really?
My dog doesn't like
Yeah, I mean, I feel like one thing, as you know, not to bring her up again, my mother can attest my whole life, I've been very great at playing devil's advocate. And I feel like that's where kind of the offer validation thing has, you know, kind of spoke to me, where, you know, I've had the conversation with people, which makes it very awkward in a sense where, you know, on March 10th, they could be out there walking their dogs on the beach, and then, or March 14th, they're out there walking their dogs on the beach, they show up on the same beach a day later and they're not allowed to do something. You know, so I feel like, in that sense, you have to kind of, again, we're not going to yell at these people. We are not going to make them feel inferior, that they didn't read the signs, that they didn't know. Try to see where they're coming from. But a situation like that where you're kind of looking at it from their perspective, right? Like, oh yeah, that's kind of weird. They were here yesterday. They were allowed to do this. You know, there was this, in a sense, line drawn where they showed up a day later and they can, you know? So I feel like it's looking at a lot of things where if you just move to the area and say, you know, January, February, you're waiting for it to get nice out, beginning of March, you start bringing your dog to the beach, now midway through March, you're getting yelled at for bringing your dog to the beach. You know, I feel like in a situation like that, the person's sitting there like, wait, it was okay that I did this last week, but I didn't do it this week. You know, but again, it's one of those things where a lot of these conversations you're having with people, you know, I feel like it's kind of like a two-pronged approach. Part of you is like, do we really have to have this conversation? Like, don't you know this already? And I feel like those are the hardest conversations to have because you still have to have it with kind of a smile on your face, calm demeanor. You know, again, back to the trash, you know, like, do you really have to go out there and tell somebody it's not okay to throw their trash in the parking lot? You know, but there's two ways to approach that conversation, right? Because if you approach that conversation fire and brimstone and angry, that's what you're gonna get back, you know? They did something wrong, bring it to their attention, hopefully they kind of, you know, make amends of it or resolve it themselves by picking up the trash or whatever it happens to be, but that's what we got law enforcement for, you know? That situation is, if you're upset and you're fired up and they're doing something wrong, those things colliding together are only gonna escalate a situation. So like John said, there's no bad reason or bad time to call law enforcement. Always have them there, they'll always have your back. Does anybody else have any other examples of things that kind of went wrong? Okay, well I guess that's a good thing, right? It was like all season, we only got 2 negative things that happened. Let's take that as a positive. I think Steve and John have a couple scenarios they're going to work out for you guys. Other than that, you know, I don't know if you guys have my email address, but Gage_Bon-Jovi, you guys can reach out to me for anything.
I'm thinking about making a contact sheet and putting that up on Slack.
Yeah.
I think that everyone can reference.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's it for me.